let's be honest about this, £13,000 probably isn't a lot of money to your average Aston Martin DB11 owner. 13 grand is probably what they'd spend on wheels and trim and a stereo and a celestial roof lining. But £70,000? I think 70 grand would get your average Aston owner's attention. And £13,000 may be the difference if you're living in the UK between a V12 and this new V8 engine DB11. But if you're subject to the Chinese taxation system, it's 70 grand. So the Aston DB11 V8 is the first Aston to use an AMG engine, part of a deal that was done 4 years ago and they've been working on for quite some time. It's the same V8 engine that you'll find in an AMG GT, except it's dressed and tuned slightly differently. This car has just over 500 horsepower, a V12, just under 600 I think. That seems like quite a lot to separate them. But there's more between these two cars than just engine and power. The next critical difference between an Aston Martin DB11 V8 and a V12 is weight. This car weighs 115 kilos less than a V12, and that's a result not only of the engine being lighter, but because it needs one less radiator. If you look at the difference between the cars on paper in terms of performance, it's only a tenth of a second on a standing start to 62 miles an hour. But the really important thing is that this engine produces only 18 pound-foot of torque less than the V12. So if you account for the weight saving, this car actually has more torque to weight than the 12-cylinder car. And on the road, that is exactly how it feels under your foot. The way this engine revs between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM, which is where you spend most of your time on the road, really is very impressive. There's a lot of usable power here, and when you're doing things like driving down the road, overtaking, speeding up for motorways, that sort of stuff, this car feels every bit as quick as the 12-cylinder one does. It sounds pretty great as well, perhaps not like a V12 Aston Martin, granted, and a little bit like an AMG C63 or an AMG GT, but there are differences in the way this car sounds compared to the AMG applications. Aston's been very careful in tuning the exhaust, tuning the intake, making its own audio signature, and there's no system tuning going on with the audio system in here, and apparently there is in AMGs these days. So what you're hearing is all engine noise, and it's a little bit more subtle, a little bit smoother than you get in your average AMG, and it suits the car down to the ground. It doesn't sound as good as an old Vantage V8, but it's getting there. Big front engine GT cars are often about how much confidence you can have in the front axle. Once you get a feel for the grip level, you can really enjoy cars like this, but you can't always do that because some of them are a little bit too soft and over-isolated. For me, the DB11 V12 was a little bit like that. It was just a little bit soft, but this V8 version, it steers with a lot more weight and a lot more precision and feel than the V12 does. So you just get a much clearer idea of what the front wheels are doing and how much grip you've got. The car's body control is much better too, so the ride is tauter and better damped, and you also end up with better feel for the rear of the car because you've got more confidence in the front, and you've got that ability to push on a little bit and get a feel for the grip level. So you just end up having so much more fun and being much more involved driving this car than you really ever did with a V12. It's got that sporting GT feel that an Aston Martin should have, in my book. And it's also got so much breadth of ability as well. So several driving modes, those adaptive dampers can be nice and compliant if you want them to be, and it can cruise almost as well as a V12, I dare say, but it's got so much more going on as a driver's car. So get ready for the big cliche. Is less actually more in the DB11's case? Well, yes, I think it is, given that fewer cylinders is actually giving you better handling, more driver focus, almost as much performance, more usable torque, and more budget to spend on options. Why wouldn't it be? To me, this is just a better DB11. It's as simple as that. And if accepting that ends up putting you in the minority where Aston Martin owners are concerned, well, I don't think I'd care much.